Welcome to this explainer. All right, let's jump straight in. When we talk about India, we're not just talking about a nation-state. We're looking at a vast, living tapestry woven from thousands of years of human experience. From the snow-capped Himalayas to the tropical shores of the Indian Ocean, this subcontinent has served as the birthplace for major world religions, the theater for grand empires, and a continuous civilization that has adapted and thrived through constant transformation. Today, we're tracing exactly how this ancient legacy was built and how it continues to shape our present and our future.
To make sense of 4,000 years of history, we're going to follow 6 distinct threads today: ancient roots and spiritual awakenings, the classical Indian empires, Islamic rule and Mughal synthesis, British colonialism and rebellion, the struggle for freedom, and finally, modern India's living tapestry. Let's get into it.
Section 1. Ancient Roots, Spiritual Awakenings.
It's literally mind-blowing to think about the sheer age of all this. Way back around 2600 BCE, the Indus Valley Civilization was already building these massive urban centers across modern-day Pakistan and northwestern India, places like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro. We're talking about incredibly advanced societies here. They had streets laid out in precise grid patterns, private wells, and vast underground drainage systems that honestly practically rivaled modern plumbing. They even had this sophisticated script that historians still haven't been able to decipher today. How wild is that?
So, following the mysterious decline of the Indus Valley, a brand new era kicks off around 1500 BCE, the Vedic Age. This is marked by the arrival of the Indo-Aryans, and it fundamentally shifted the cultural landscape of the subcontinent. They brought with them a rich oral tradition, a new language, Sanskrit, and sacred texts known as the Vedas. These texts basically formed the religious and philosophical backbone of what would eventually evolve into Hinduism. This period also introduced the Varna system. This organized society into distinct classes like priests, warriors, merchants, and laborers, laying the groundwork for a highly complex and enduring social hierarchy.
But by the 6th century BCE, you start seeing a growing dissatisfaction with these rigid Vedic rituals. People were looking for something different, and this spiritual seeking led to an explosion of philosophical diversity. You've got Jainism, founded by Mahavira, placing a massive emphasis on ahimsa, or strict nonviolence. Around the exact same time, Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, renounces his royal life to seek enlightenment, teaching the Eightfold Path as a way to end suffering. Meanwhile, the Vedic religion wasn't just sitting still. It was morphing into classical Hinduism, absorbing local deities and offering diverse paths to salvation. India's profound tradition of religious pluralism was firmly taking root right here in the ancient world.
Section 2. The Classical Indian Empires.
Watch how quickly this political landscape builds. In 321 BCE, the Maurya Empire achieves the very first large-scale political unification of India. Boom! A massive centralized administration is born. Fast forward to the 4th century CE, and we hit the Gupta Empire, which is widely considered a golden age of arts and sciences. And hey, it wasn't just happening in the north. Down in the south, by the 9th century CE, the Chola dynasty becomes this formidable maritime power, using an impressive navy to extend Indian cultural and economic influence way across the sea to Sri Lanka and Southeast Asia.
Jumping back to the Maurya Empire for a second, we absolutely have to talk about Emperor Ashoka, who began his reign in 268 BCE. See, he initially expanded his empire through brutal, bloody conquests, most notably the Kalinga War. But the sheer scale of the casualties deeply affected him. He underwent this profound moral pivot. He completely embraced Buddhism, literally carving edicts into rocks and massive pillars across his empire, advocating for dharma, which meant moral law, nonviolence in the welfare of his subjects. Ashoka's state sponsorship is actually a major reason Buddhism spread so widely across Asia.
Then we hit the Gupta Empire, and the scale of their intellectual boom is just amazing. This era wasn't merely about conquering land, it was about conquering the mind. It is so fascinating that Indian mathematicians during this time actually conceptualized zero as a number and formalized the decimal system. Think about that. Those are the concepts that essentially built our modern mathematical world. At the same time, their astronomers were making groundbreaking discoveries about the solar system, and physicians were advancing really complex surgical techniques. It was a true cultural renaissance.
Section 3. Islamic rule and Mughal synthesis.
The absolutely crucial concept to grasp for this era is syncretism. That's the blending of different cultural, religious, or political beliefs into an entirely new, harmonious system. Beginning with the Delhi Sultanate in 1206 and peaking with the massive Mughal Empire in the 1500s, India experienced this unique blending of Persian, Islamic, and indigenous Indian traditions. Rulers often adapted their policies to suit the diverse Hindu majority.
And the most iconic physical manifestation of this syncretism, it's of course the Taj Mahal, which just seamlessly blends Persian, Islamic, and Indian architectural styles into a monumental masterpiece.
Now, within the Mughal dynasty itself, we see wildly different strategies of governance. On one hand, you have Emperor Akbar. He fostered incredible religious tolerance, going so far as to create a syncretic faith to bridge cultural divides, and he actually abolished discriminatory taxes. But contrast that directly with his descendant, Aurangzeb. He implemented a very strict Sharia orthodoxy, reintroduced taxes on non-Muslims, and engaged in these endless wars that heavily drained the empire's wealth. It perfectly illustrates how shifting leadership philosophies can either unify or totally fracture a vast empire.
But, despite the political decline that followed Aurangzeb, this era left an indelible mark on daily life that you can still feel today. We see the evolution of the Urdu language, which is this beautiful blend of Persian, Arabic, and local dialects. Mughalite cuisine completely transformed and enriched the culinary landscape. Painting styles were refined, and masterful, intricate garden architecture was introduced all over. This cultural synthesis remains a deeply woven part of the Indian fabric right now.
Section 4. British colonialism and rebellion.
So, how exactly did a single trading company manage to conquer an entire subcontinent? Well, it happened in 3 pretty insidious phases. First, the British East India Company arrived simply looking to trade. Harmless enough, right? But by 1757, they leveraged local instability to win the Battle of Plassey, which allowed them to install puppet rulers in wealthy regions like Bengal. And finally, over the next century through strategic warfare and calculated alliances, they transformed from mere merchants into the de facto political rulers of India, completely disrupting traditional agricultural and economic systems along the way.
As you can imagine, that tension had to snap. And in 1857, it absolutely did. Sparked by military insensitivity and deep-seated economic grievances, a massive revolt erupted, what's often called the First War of Indian Independence. People from all sorts of backgrounds rose up against the East India Company. Now, while the British ultimately suppressed the rebellion, it thoroughly exposed the fragility of corporate rule. It literally forced the British Crown to step in and take direct control, which officially kicked off the era of the British Raj.
The Raj left behind a highly complex dual legacy. On one side of the ledger, you have modernization. They built vast railway networks, integrated the country with telegraph lines and postal services, and introduced English education. But flip the coin, and you see severe division and decline. There was active deindustrialization of local Indian crafts to favor British imports and highly calculated divide-and-rule policies. They introduced separate electorates, which deliberately sowed the seeds of communal mistrust between Hindus and Muslims.
Section 5. The struggle for freedom. A defining concept of this next era was introduced by Mahatma Gandhi when he returned to India in 1915, Satyagraha, or truth force. This was a completely revolutionary philosophy of peaceful civil disobedience. Gandhi basically proved that you didn't need weapons to fight an empire. The most awe-inspiring example of this was the 1930 Salt March. It was a 240-mile trek in direct defiance of British taxes. This immense moral power of nonviolence galvanized millions of people and eventually became a blueprint for civil rights movements globally. However, it's important to remember Gandhi's way wasn't the only path taken toward independence. While Gandhi anchored his movement in the moral power of nonviolence, civil disobedience, and rural self-sufficiency, leaders like Subhas Chandra Bose took a radically different approach. Bose embraced militant nationalism and armed struggle, even going so far as to form the Indian National Army during World War II to physically fight the British. So you have both of these leaders, through entirely different methods, channeling immense patriotic zeal to push the British toward the exit.
And that massive collective push finally culminated on August 15, 1947. India achieved independence. But this victory was incredibly bittersweet. The British hastily implemented a plan of partition, drawing borders to create the 2 independent dominions of India and Pakistan. This decision triggered one of the largest mass migrations in human history, accompanied by just horrific, tragic communal violence. The scars of partition left a profound trauma that fundamentally shaped the geopolitical reality of South Asia that we still see on the news today.
Section 6. Modern India's living tapestry. To hold this newly independent nation together, they desperately needed a visionary framework. And this vision was anchored by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the principal architect of the Indian Constitution, which was adopted in 1950. By institutionalizing social justice, equality, and secularism, the ultimate goal was to protect the rights of the marginalized and unify this massive, incredibly diverse population into a sovereign democratic republic. It was literally the crucial legal and moral glue needed for modern nation building.
From the ancient grid streets of the Indus Valley to the bustling tech hubs we see today, India is a true civilization state. It is constantly performing this incredible balancing act, juggling rapid modernization with deep-seated ancient traditions. So, we'll leave you with this question to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. As this living tapestry continues to weave new threads, how will India's deeply rooted past and remarkable resilience shape its role in our shared global future? Thanks so much for joining me today. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.